Hi, good morning, everybody. Welcome to our May webinar with the perfect timing since May is Mental Health Awareness Month. We thought it would be great to reach outside to some resources that OECS works closely with and bring in some subject matter experts on mental health matters and workplace concerns during the pandemic. As you may have noticed,
Melissa,
yes?
just really quick, if you want to give it just another minute or so, let's see if we can make sure everyone hops on in time. I'm so sorry.
No. You let me know.
All right, we have rolled over to the top of the hour. I give you the okay now.
All right. Do you want me to repeat all that or you good?
Yeah, that might be helpful.
Okay, so I had introduced myself, Melissa Olheiser with OECS, and that our May webinar was fitting as May is Mental Health Awareness Month and bringing in some subject matter experts that OECS works with from Prairie St. John's to discuss mental health matters, workplace concerns during the pandemic. I also wanted to announce that just last week, OECS received approval for continuing ed credits by the Midwest Center for Occupational Health and Safety, the University of Minnesota School of Public Health. For going forward, if you need a CEU credit, please put your name in the chat. We can go back to the email list to find your email, but we really would need your name and something like, please give me the CEU. And then upon completion of this, within the next week or so, you will receive a certificate via email, whichever you use to register for this webinar. So again, please put your name in the chat requesting the CEU. We have an option to print that chat, and then our team will get you a certificate via email. My presenters today that I'll be sitting with, Michelle is the Director of Human Resources and has been with Prairie St. John's since 2010. Michelle's going to do the first 10 to 15 minutes of this session. We're going to split it into two. She'll be working with the HR and employer-focused questions. There will be a Q&A at the end of her session. If you have questions, please also put those in the chat as we have someone that will be monitoring those, and Michelle will be able to answer your questions after her first segment. The second presenter is Jeana, and she has been with Prairie St. John's since 2016, and she is a therapist and director of performance improvement and quality assurance at Prairie St. John's. Jeana will take the second portion of our webinar today, and she'll be focusing on clinical and mental health side of things, the actions to take, what you might see, as well as the facts and figures. So to get us started, I'm going to let Michelle take over and start that first portion of our webinar today.
Perfect. Thanks so much, Melissa, and thanks for having me. Like Melissa said, I've been at Prairie since 2010, and I've worked in HR for more than 25 years. Jeana and I have co-presented several times, so you get both generations, and I have learned a lot from Jeana over the years that we've been together. So it's fun to present with her. So she'll actually take the clinical side and I'll take the HR side. And of course I could talk HR all the time. But I will respect that because she's got a lot of great clinical information for you as well. But one of the things that Melissa had asked us to talk about specifically was mental health and the pandemic. So in order to do that, I have a couple of poll questions for you. What state are you in, and then how many employees that you have. So if you want to just take a few seconds here, that kind of helps me figure out.
We have about 75% who have voted. Give everyone about 10 more seconds to submit their responses.
Give you just a couple more seconds here.
All right, I'm going to go ahead and close that poll.
Okay, thanks. All right, so let's see. So about half of you are from Minnesota, and then North Dakota, and then followed by, a few others, which is actually very similar to the patient mix that we see at Prairie St. John's. Usually about half or 55% of our patients are from Minnesota. And then the bulk thereafter is from North Dakota. And then we have kind of some other states that pop in there. So that's cool. And then from an employee perspective, boy, you are really split. Okay. So for those of you that have smaller organizations, some rules don't apply to you. And then once you get over 50, a lot of times most laws apply to you. So I'll just take that into consideration as I'm talking about. So, but yeah, basically 25% of you are in each of those categories. So interesting. Okay, perfect. And then let's launch one more. I'm curious how many of you have an employee assistance program or an EAP. If you don't know, that's fine. It just helps me. Perfect. That's great, Heather. So a little more than half of you do have an employee assistance program. I highly recommend it, but for those of you that have smaller companies, it wouldn't surprise me that you wouldn't have one. But we'll talk a little bit more about that coming up. So COVID, I think that I probably get 3 new articles, via email every single day because things are constantly changing. But where we are today is that you can legally mandate someone getting the vaccine. According to the Equal Opportunity Commission, which is in charge of making sure that you don't discriminate against people, you can legally mandate it. The question that we'll talk about next is, should you? And then just in some recent surveys in healthcare, 58% of hospitals would say that they would support a mandate, but 42% say they're not. So even in healthcare, we're not all, on board with mandating it. And then look at the next one. So 65% of people said that they would be willing to leave their job if a mandate was implemented. And so the 65% number is kind of interesting to me because I think the goal nationwide, Biden's goal, Governor Walz's goal in Minnesota is to have 70% vaccinated, right? But you have 65% that are like, I'm going to leave, or I would leave if there was a mandate. And then 4 out of 10 companies overall, so this is all companies, said that they are not going to mandate a vaccination. So, do you do it or don't you do it? The answer is it depends. And I think personally, the biggest decision point in that is what's your culture. If your culture, wants people to think independently and there's accountability, then I would really leave that up to the employees to decide whether or not they should be vaccinated. On the flip side, if you have a very structured, very black and white organization, it might make sense to you. For me personally, we're not going to mandate it here at Prairie. And we're actually part of a larger company that has 80,000 employees, and they are not going to mandate it as well. Not that we don't believe in it or that we don't think that it's the right thing to do for encouraging people to get the vaccine. It's just not the way that we are culturally. And so, and I'm just one personally that I don't like to force things on employees if we don't have to. And so even like with the flu shot, let's say, we're accredited by the Joint Commission. So I know a lot of you have accrediting organizations. Well, they require us to offer the flu vaccine, and their intention is that everybody gets it. But even with that, you always are going to have people that have religious reasons, they have personal issues. And so in our world with the flu shot, they can sign off and say, I don't want to get the flu vaccine because of this. So we count that as it was offered to them, even on the flu side. Now, we haven't gone that far with the COVID yet, making people sign off on it. We offered it, and that's kind of where we're at. So this slide really talks about, how you could do it, and, try to get people to get vaccinated. So number one is encourage those employees to get vaccinated. Really talk about you care about their health and safety, the health and safety of their coworkers, or the customers that you serve. So really kind of put the feeling side into the vaccine. And this is, we care about you as a person. So we really think that this is the right thing to do, and make sure that you provide education. The problem with the education is it's constantly changing. Now it's like, well, do I need a booster? I don't need a booster. So, you just try to do the best that you can. Make it really easy for people to get vaccinated. Maybe you offer rides, maybe you do it on site, give them time off to go get the vaccine. At least here in North Dakota, I'm not 100% sure about Minnesota, but I mean, they can go. Like yesterday, I got a text from Sam's Club saying, hey, we offer the COVID vaccine, right? You can walk into pretty much any pharmacy and you can get the vaccine there. So we did initially do on-site vaccinations for our employees, but now with all of our new hires, we're just encouraging them to go to the pharmacy because it's so much easier. So, I mean, that is definitely an option. If your employees are anything like ours, offer them a reward. Gift cards go over well with my staff. We usually have like a $5 gift card when we offer stuff. Jeans Day in our world works really well. So, sometimes there's things that you can do that are free or not costly. We actually didn't have to offer an award. Our staff were so excited about getting the vaccine. Like it was like a herd of elephants when we opened up the vaccine appointments. Like it was nuts. But that was in January. And so, I mean, it's a little bit different now, but I think that, if you need to, it might be something that's worthwhile to you. Be a role model. I mean, that's why you see, the president, the senators, all, people in Hollywood getting their vaccine, right? I mean, it's like, it's cool to get your vaccine. And then, finally, maybe you just keep sending emails that they have to read or text messages about, don't forget to get your vaccine. And maybe they'll finally get around to it. I think it will be interesting now that Pfizer's opened it up, to younger kids. So maybe, adults with kids will start to think about getting it. I think it'll be interesting to see how that, rolls around. If you choose to mandate the vaccine, make sure that you tell them why that you made that decision. How, talk about your culture and what's important for you guys. So I think that that's really important to explain, and you just don't tell them, well, this is what we're going to do. I think it's important to help them understand how it fits with your culture and what you're most concerned about. And then you're going to have an alternative plan, because there might be people that are allergic. They might have religious reasons, personal conflicts, things like that. So you really do need to make sure that you have an alternative, because I'm guessing it's hard for you to find employees. We're having a hard time finding employees. So I certainly don't want to lose anybody. And I'm sure you don't either over the vaccine. Oops. Okay, so Jeana's going to talk about kind of some signs and symptoms of mental health. But from an HR perspective, one of the things that I want to put in your minds is that as leaders and role models within your organization, watch your employees for changes in their mental health. I think all you have to do is probably turn on the news one day and you will see, a shooting, stabbing, somebody, attempting suicide. Open up your newspaper and you'll probably see an obituary of a suicide. Sadly, it's really out there. And one of the things that we want to do as Prairie St. John's is to help people understand that we don't want them to hide. We want them to talk to you. And sometimes one of your employees is suffering and you won't know it. But you might see some things. And like I said, Jeana will talk about that. So be watchful because it's there. And it's hiding under the surface. And some employees need you to catch it. And they need help, but they maybe are afraid because they're afraid that you're going to label them as a poor performer or as a weak person. There's all these kinds of things that go through your mind when you think about mental health. And sadly, mental health is treated differently than, if I had diabetes, I would probably come and tell you, hey, I have diabetes, so I need to make sure I take my blood, do my blood sugars every so often. And you would talk openly about it. We don't do that with mental health. And that's why sometimes you need to, encourage them and just talk to them about what's going on and listen. Never ever ignore comments about suicide. Someone's not going to bring up suicide unless if they've had it in their mind. So you need to talk about that. And this is where employee assistance comes into play, is you and I are not trained like Jeana is to handle people that have mental health issues. We can be a good friend, we can be a good listener, but you really need someone that's trained to help them walk through the process. And you still can be a great listener and a friend, and you can be supportive and understanding, but they really need to have someone that can help them walk through the process and, listen to them with an unbiased opinion and give them some coping skills and things that they can work on to try to get out of the rut that they're in or what they're feeling, and help them work through sometimes, the voices in their head tell them things no different than, I have, things in my head that I don't think I'm good at. And I let my brain tell me, well, you're not really good at that. Mental health is very similar. You're your own worst enemy, right? And those things play. But I need somebody that's trained to help me walk through that, especially if someone says they're suicidal. But as a supervisor, as a leader, as a coworker, a friend, watch for it, because a lot of times people won't speak up. And we all need to be aware of that, because there's too many people that are losing their lives. There's too many people that end up losing their jobs because they can't keep it all together. And, frankly, there's a lot of bad stuff, especially with the pandemic. There are people that, are still trying to balance their kids. Talk about a huge burden. You've been trying to teach your kids for over a year. They're on your nerves. And you don't know how they do math anymore. And that's stressful. And now you're worried that your kids can't read. And there's a lot of stuff on people's minds. And so sometimes just having them call EAP just to listen is really helpful. Any questions or that I have before I turn it over to Jeana? And she's going to talk a lot more about it, but I just wanted to give you the HR standpoint of the listening and using EAP.
Thank you, Michelle. I'm not seeing any questions in the chat yet. If anyone does have a question, feel free to submit it. We can wait about another minute or so to see if anyone does have any final last questions. If anyone would prefer to ask their question live, you're welcome to do that as well. If it's a sensitive question that you might not want to put into the chat just because your name would be associated, you can also use the Q&A button at the bottom of your screen, and you can select the anonymous question? I'm not seeing anything come through yet, though.
And we have our email addresses at the end of the slide, so you could always email us too.
All right, no questions yet, so I'll go ahead and hand it on over.
Perfect. So I'll get started. During these presentations, we're usually live, so we like them to be very interactive. Obviously, I want to speak on things that you guys have questions about or curious about. So certainly feel free to pop them in the chat box. We can answer them throughout the presentation or at the end, whichever you guys prefer. So I'll talk about mental health and increased concerns on individuals during a global pandemic. The topics that we'll cover, just some mental health statistics. A lot of people like to have numbers, with the qualitative stuff that we'll be talking about as well. We'll also talk about suicide and suicide statistics, work-life balance, proactive solutions for mental health, and then coping strategies and resources that you can use outside of work. So mental health statistics, the economy is now a significant source of stress for 70% of Americans. Obviously, as the pandemic kind of feels like it's starting to wind down, mask mandates are being lifted, more people are getting vaccinated. It doesn't necessarily mean that the stress is going to be going away. Many of you have probably experienced stress with uncertainty in the markets, building supplies, different things that we maybe had planned on doing that are now getting changed a little bit. So just know that this stress may continue for several months. For some people, the stress may have already ended. Everybody's going to be at different spots in their lives in the ongoing months. The government's response to this crisis caused stress to 67% of Americans. More than 1/3 of Americans have displayed clinical signs of anxiety, depression, or both since the pandemic began. And only 50% of employees are comfortable discussing mental health issues. So obviously, depending on which industry you're in, working at a psychiatric hospital, talking about mental health, feelings, suicide, these are very, very common topics. However, in other workplaces, a lot of people wouldn't be comfortable discussing this. So one thing that we'll emphasize throughout this presentation, it only takes one person to be the listening ear, to offer support. And it's really important that even if you don't feel like you can't help people, at least don't hurt them. So if someone brings you a concern that they have, for them it's a real concern. They're bringing it up to you. It's very important never to dismiss that, make fun of them, act like it's not a big deal. We have to keep in mind that something that's a big deal to me may not be a big deal to someone else, but your opinion on it wouldn't make it any less for me. In a March Pew survey, 18% said they experienced nervousness or anxiety, most or all the time during the past week. Text messages to a federal disaster distress hotline increased more than 1,000%. Mental health is poorest among those who are unemployed for 6 months or more. And the long-term psychological consequences of collective traumas can last a decade or more. So when we think about trauma, a lot of people kind of put that in a box of people.
Is that stuff clean?
Who are experiencing military trauma, but really understanding that trauma really does impact.
That's clean? Yeah. Oh, I didn't know that.
Trauma does impact all of us.
Rugs and stuff? Yeah. Nice. Mm-hmm.
So sorry about that, everyone. Go ahead, Jeana.
Okay. No, that's okay. I'll just go back.
Yeah, we were getting a little feedback, sorry.
Oh, wait, we may be way forward. Sorry about that, everyone. I will just get back. Okay. So understanding that trauma it's something that tends to happen to us. It's not something we chose. An event happens to us that we felt we had no control over, and it kind of changes the pathways in our brain. So maybe one day you go to the park, everything's fine. Pathways meet in your brain that I can go to the park and everything's gonna be fine. Maybe another day you're at the park and you witness a horrific event. A new pathway is made in your brain saying that this is no longer fine. If you start thinking about going to the park, you might feel anxious. You might start new behaviors, stuttering, kind of having like mindlessness. So understanding that there is specific therapy for people who experience trauma, and there's ways to kind of undo those brain pathways so that we can make new, healthier pathways and people are able to function as they normally would before the trauma happened. So something like a pandemic, for a lot of people, those of us on this call may not have been touched as harshly as other people, but think about people who were already in really unhealthy relationships with their families. We know that domestic violence increased during the pandemic. If somebody who is violent in the home is now with you 24 hours a day, you're not able to escape that. We know people experienced, harsher situations than they did when they were able to leave and go to school and go to work throughout the day. So just being really mindful that the employees that you work with may have endured things that you wouldn't readily know about unless they brought it up to you. So we're going to do a quick poll. I'm just curious what you guys think. Suicide is the blank leading cause of death among people ages 15 to 34 in the United States. Is it the second leading cause, the fifth? Is it the 10th? Or maybe you're not sure. So I'll just give everyone a moment.
Yep, we have about 80% who have voted, so I'll give everyone about 5 more seconds.
Thank you.
All right, I'm going to go ahead and close that poll now.
Yeah, you guys got it right. So it is the second leading cause of death between the ages of 15 to 34. I believe accident is the first one. Obviously, these are very discouraging numbers. Working in a psychiatric hospital, being a therapist, we know that suicide is not the answer. There's always hope and healing beyond the moment that you're experiencing these suicidal thoughts. We'll talk a little bit about suicide. I won't get too deep into it, but I want to make sure you guys have the information you need. So in 2019, more than 47,000 people died from suicide. That's one death every 11 minutes. Many adults think about suicide or attempt suicide. So about 12 million seriously thought about suicide, 3.5 made a plan for suicide, and 1.4 of them attempted suicide. So these numbers are really important. So everybody knows these are incredibly high numbers. Suicide is being discussed more, but we really need to do more to have a proactive approach, letting people know there's always someone in your life that you can reach out to. Most of us know somebody who has died by suicide, and it can leave us with so many unanswered questions. It's important to remember that people who died by suicide truly didn't see a way out. They felt like they were between a rock and a hard place. They did not see any hope behind it. When people experience it, depression or a mental illness that leads them to believe suicide is the answer, they really see that as the answer. Most people will fight these thoughts and feelings as long as they possibly can. But typically they're experiencing a lot of discomfort, a lot of hopelessness. They don't have maybe the supports that they could ask or reach out for. They typically don't reach out for those supports when they need it most. It is important to remember that suicide is preventable. We need to get early intervention for people who are experiencing uncontrolled anxiety, depression, or other mental health issues. We need people to be able to get to appointments, access medications, and get the resources they need. So if you know somebody who's struggling with thoughts of suicide, don't ever hesitate to say, hey, I'm really worried about you. I would love to help you make an appointment and help you get there. I know when you're experiencing depression, you don't have a lot of energy or motivation to do the things that you normally would. What can I do to assist you in this time? Or even better, tell them what you're able to help them with. Oftentimes they'll be very excited that somebody's willing to reach out. Obviously, many of us aren't experts at talking to people who are experiencing suicidal ideation, but it's important to know there's a lot of resources out there. The World Health Organization, the CDC, there's a lot of great information that you can access. There's also trainings you can do, like mental health first aid or suicide prevention, so that within your organizations, you can feel more confident talking about this difficult topic. So suicide is the 10th leading cause of death in the US for all ages. It's important to know that there's kind of a trend in research called diseases of despair. It's where a high level of Americans are dying from opioid overdoses, alcohol-related diseases, and suicide. It's really thinking about kind of having an inability to cope with what we're experiencing and using something to change how we feel about it. With therapy, a great part about it, even though a lot of people may be against doing therapy, is that you can learn how to be okay with discomfort, anxiety, stress. We'll talk about mindfulness a little bit later in this presentation, things that people can do to really transform their lives. Excuse me, and how they see things. So hopefully you guys can kind of read through some of these suicides statistics. Globally, nearly 800,000 people die by suicide in the world each year. It's about one death every 40 seconds. It is the second leading cause of death in the world for those ages 15 to 24. It's kind of the younger adults who don't see things getting better. They may have some sense of hopelessness. And then depression is the leading cause of disability worldwide. So the gender disparities are really important to look at. Just always keep in your mind that white males are most likely to die by suicide. They tend to use the most lethal means. Firearm is the most used common of suicide among males. In the hospital, we always ask about firearms for every single patient before they discharge. We work to get those firearms secured. If you ever have someone in your life that you're concerned about, always ask them if they have access to guns. If you know they have access to guns, don't hesitate to have a conversation with them saying, I know you have firearms in your home right now. I'm really, really worried about you, and I want to make sure we can get these secured. I've had this conversation, both personally and professionally. It's really important to remember that nearly 22,000 people may still be here if they didn't have access to a firearm when they were suicidal. That's just 1 year alone. So being willing to have those conversations. Obviously, there are other lethal means that people can use to die by suicide, but firearms are by and large the most lethal method. And like I said, it's the one that males most commonly use. Females are more likely than males to have suicidal thoughts, and they also experience depression at a rate of 2 times the rate of males. Females attempt suicide 3 times as often, but males die more often due to the lethal means. And then poisoning is the most common method of suicide for females, and that would be something like an overdose. These are just some different age disparities. I won't get too far into these details just because we want to be mindful of the time. You guys can kind of read through some of these, and the slides will also be sent out so you can look at these as well. The highest increase in suicide is males, ages 50 and older. So that's kind of a really important number to keep in mind. Like I said, many of you know people who have died by suicide. It's important for us to know the numbers so we can know what to do. Thinking about people who may be high risk for suicide, if they have a history of a suicide attempt, or if they have a family member who died by suicide, that automatically increases the likelihood that they may attempt suicide. We don't say these facts to scare people. It's really just to inform people. Industry and occupation, mining, quarrying, oil and gas extraction for males are the highest industry to die by suicide. Construction is second for males. Other services such as auto repair for males, ag, forestry, fishing, and hunting, also males, and then transportation and warehousing, both males and females. And then these are just some more for industry and occupation. Just keep in mind, there's always things that we can do to help people who are feeling suicidal. A lot of people who are hospitalized for suicidal ideation were in a very stressful situation, and they said, I'm going to kill myself. And immediately somebody did the right thing. They brought them to the hospital. And then after things calm down, you're kind of out of that crisis mode. They say, I'm not actually going to kill myself. Why am I here? Please let me leave. Once you say you're going to kill yourself, if you have plan and intent, you may need to be hospitalized for safety. It's really a physician's opinion. Police officers, doctors, they can all put holds on people who need to be getting help but are refusing treatment. But it's important to remember that oftentimes when people are in the hospital for a few days, things calm down. They're kind of able to relieve the crisis mode that they were once in, get started on medications, have a plan for therapy. People do much better when they're getting ready to leave. Obviously, we want to avoid that. Inpatient hospitalization is very stressful and it's quite expensive. And we'll talk a little bit later in the presentation on other options for people who may be struggling. Like Michelle said, we always have to take statements of suicide very seriously. We can't ever be the one to say, I don't think they're serious about it. I'm just going to ignore that comment. So either calling 911, bringing them to a place like Prairie St. John's, bringing them to an ER. So that way they can be evaluated. A trained professional can kind of assess to see if they need further treatment or not. We're going to do another poll. I'm just curious what you guys all think. Is work-life balance a myth? Do you think it's possible to achieve work-life balance? Or do you feel like we're always going to lean farther one way or the other? There's obviously no right answer on this one. It's really your opinion.
We have about 70% who have voted. Give everyone a few more seconds to submit their answers. All right, I'm going to close that poll now.
Okay, so most of you are saying false. So this part of the presentation, we'll talk a lot more about agency, kind of all of our ability to self-govern, be able to make our own choices and do the things that we need to do to keep ourselves happy. As many of you can guess, nobody's going to do it for us. It's really about us finding the tools that we need to live a good life. So 25% of Americans describe themselves as super stressed. In order to kind of find balance in our life, we need to always set manageable goals, be efficient with time at work. At a hospital like Prairie St. John's, there's about 380 employees. Obviously, they're all very nice people. But I know on days where I have a lot of things to accomplish, I can't spend any time chatting with people. Again, that's how their evening before was, how their weekend was. I know I have a lot of work to do. I have to be efficient with my own time. You can always ask for flexibility as people are coming out of the pandemic. Some of them were working from home. If you're an introvert who does really well in that kind of quiet, self-motivating environment, you may want to ask your boss for continued days working from home. For people who are more extroverted, very social, they may be just clawing to get back into the office. Understanding every single person is going to be different, but it doesn't mean you can't ask your boss to be flexible as you transition back. It's also really important to communicate effectively. It's very common in the Midwestern states that people will be quite passive or even passive aggressive with the communication they use. In therapy, we always teach people if something's on your mind, try to say it in a healthy way. You don't need to cuss, you don't need to raise your voice, but being very direct. A lot of times we think, if I subtly make this little dig, this person will understand I'm frustrated. A lot of times it's just easier to sit down and say, hey, I'm having a hard time with this. Could we talk about it so we can get back on the same page? Communicating effectively, could be an entire presentation in itself, but it is important that we all take accountability for the words that we're using to make sure other people are understanding us and we understand those around us as well. Always make sure you give yourself a break. We've talked in previous presentations, and Michelle even pointed out every generation is different. Some people really pride themselves on working 40, 60, 80 hours a week. Other generations or other individuals may not see that as important. Having a good home life, a good balance in their life may be a more important goal for them to have. But it's important to remember, as at this spot in the pandemic, we don't know if it's over yet, to really give yourself a break and to give grace to the people around you as well. I think we can all say everybody's doing the best that they can with what they have. In order to continue good work-life balance, it's really important, especially for those who work from home or those who feel like they have to be accessible from home, is to take time out of the day where, where we unplug. We're not checking emails, responding to texts or phone calls. Within your homes, it's really important to divide responsibilities. If you live alone, obviously you're number one in charge. But if you have other people in the house with you, making sure that everybody's kind of sharing the duties equally. Try not to overcommit to anything. Like I talked about before, some people pride themselves on being busy, but if you get so busy to the point where you're lashing out at people, getting really cranky, and you may be busy, but everybody that you're being busy with is miserable because you have a bad attitude about it, it's important to kind of take a step back and try to clear things off your plate. Don't ever hesitate to reach out for support. Support is often really reciprocal. So I need to do something to support you if I expect you to do something to support me in return. So having, one or two people in your life that you can kind of trade tasks with. If someone comes over and helps you with the yard project, you can ask them what you could do for them so that they continue offering that support to you as well. Many of us have, someone in their lives where they call us when they're having a bad day. They tell us all about their bad day, and not once do they ask how we're doing. Those are relationships that we need to evaluate. You could communicate effectively and say, hey, I know you call me quite often, but I don't think you ever ask how I'm doing. I want to share myself with you as well. And sometimes those people, they might not get it. So evaluating how often you answer their phone calls or how much support you're willing to offer them is really important so that you don't get burned out. Obviously, taking advantage of the employee assistance program, which so many companies are willing to pay for. Staying active, treating your body well, asking for help. Like I said before, these are all things that we're responsible for. No one's going to come into your life and do it for you. So being willing to make necessary changes so that you feel you can have more balance in your life. We'll talk about burnout in two different ways, one working from home and the other one with increased production. Obviously, in a lot of the industries that you all are in, there's probably participants on both sides of this. We want to make sure we can speak to both. So at the peak, 62% of adults worked from home. At Prairie St. John's, being a psychiatric hospital, we all stayed within the hospital the entire time. So I'm obviously not the best person to speak on working from home, so that wasn't something I was able to do. But just keep in mind, burnout is something you can experience whether you're in the office or at home. It can lead to high blood pressure, heart disease, obesity, weakened immune system, anxiety, depression, cognitive decline, which can lead to Alzheimer's and even death. So as an employee, none of those things are something that I'm willing to take on in my life. If I felt like my job was getting to the point where it was causing negative health effects, I would have to sit down and evaluate, is this something I want to keep doing, or do I need to make a transition in my job or in my career? Obviously, working from home is so important to have a time of day where you disconnect, where you pause for lunch, where you stop, in the early evening so that you can transition back into your home life and not feel like you have to be working 24 hours a day just because you have all of your work stuff right with you. Trying to replicate a supportive environment. A lot of people are doing, excuse me, like a Zoom happy hour. Obviously, these things don't have to center around alcohol, but really the camaraderie that people build, having communities that they can participate in. Like I said, now people are getting less virtual, more back in person. So hopefully we won't have to worry about this as much. I know a lot of businesses are going back, full-time, on campus or at the workplace in June and July. And those working from home need to communicate concerns effectively so that you feel your boss is understanding and can be supportive of the struggle that you might be experiencing. And then, of course, burnout from increased production. Many industries are very cyclical: manufacturing, healthcare, agriculture, construction. So when things are booming, it's so hard to keep up. People are getting overtime and incentives to work more, and they just can't, which is a good thing. They know that they're at the point where they can't keep taking on more and more and working more and more hours. At the same time, it's really hard when things are slow because people feel like they don't get enough hours. This is a time where, as a therapist, I would really encourage someone to keep as much individualism as they can. Know how many hours they're able to work on average, how much money they need to set aside so that when things do slow down, they have enough to kind of support themselves and they don't feel that financial burden. Again, it's not really up to your boss to guarantee you hours or guarantee wages, but you yourself can make sure that you do what you need to take care of yourself without having to rely on the organization. Always pay attention to the symptoms that you're experiencing. Most things, whether it's mental health or physical health, it's a lot easier to get ahead of it rather than playing catch up once things have gotten too serious. Big ones are headaches, joint pain, or sleeplessness. For me personally, sleeplessness, when work stress goes up, my ability to fall asleep goes down, stay asleep goes down, and then waking up really early and not feeling like I can go back to sleep. So that's kind of my big one where I know I need to do something different at work because it's affecting my home life. We all need to be protective of the lives we live at home, our families, our children. We'll talk a little bit more in this presentation, but we won't get to our deathbed say, I wish I would have worked harder. It's really important to know that other symptoms of burnout is lack of creativity, and it doesn't mean you work in a creative industry, but just being able to problem solve things, come up with a solution for something. We tend to be less creative when we're experiencing burnout. We also experience exhaustion, very negative attitudes towards our coworkers, and this is something that's easy for employees to self-govern. We tend not to notice when we're being overly negative. We may feel like we're venting or just expressing ourselves. But if I know somebody that's typically, quite pleasant to be around, and then every time I'm around them, it's really negative, almost hard to bear, I have no problem pointing out and say, I know things seem so negative right now. What can I do to help you? And that might be just kind of their little light bulb to say, oh yeah, I am being pretty negative. Who really wants to hang out with that all day? No, you can't work your way out of burnout. Burnout is usually a time where you have to take a step back and kind of let your body and your mind heal a little bit. If you try to work harder, obviously burnout's just going to get worse. It's kind of like with quicksand. But really try to find balance and strive for optimal balance every single day, which we'll talk about on the next slide. So these are just some examples on surviving burnout. Obviously, if you were to, do the EAP, they could give you, an entire plan on what you could do to help yourself. Let's say that I have an unexpected 15-hour workday. I'm not going to say I have the benefit of not having children, but as someone who lives alone, I don't have to be responsible for other people. So that makes it a lot easier for me. For those of you who do have a spouse and child, let's say you have an unexpected 15-hour workday, coordinate with your partner to say, I can't pick the kids up. Can you pick up some food? Try to share that burden a little bit if you're able to. So for me, I'm not going to be cooking, cleaning. I won't be doing laundry, and I won't be meeting up with anybody after work. I'm going to try to rest and just keep things as simple and convenient as I can. It's not my boss's job to make sure that I'm okay. It's my job. So if I can kind of put an end to this exhaustion and stress that I'm experiencing, I have to take responsibility and do that. So if I had an unexpected 15-hour workday and I chose to go, to a meeting or meet up with people after work, and I chose to kind of keep myself really, really busy and try to get a bunch of tasks done, I'm probably still going to be exhausted the next day. And I miss my opportunity to kind of recover from a long work day. Always try to work towards having a sense of purpose. When we feel that we have purpose in this world, it can kind of propel us through really stressful situations. It's when we don't feel like what the work we're doing really matters. That's when we can kind of be disillusioned to the whole thing and really ask ourselves, why am I here? What am I doing this for? Make sure you always try to prioritize and delegate. We all have to set aside this hero complex, like we're going to be the one to save everybody and fix everything. We really have to know at this time, I need to rest, I need a break, and kind of get rid of that whole, we idealize the person who's willing to work 80 hours and not sleep. And then this last one, always put our eulogy values over our resume values, making sure we know that we're living the most full, authentic life that we're able to live. And not just being concerned with how many tasks we can complete, which leads us right into the next slide. Some of you have probably seen this, but the 5 regrets of the Dino was a hospice nurse from Australia who kind of put this together, the things she commonly heard people say on their deathbed. The first one, I wish I hadn't worked so hard. Obviously, this isn't always great for employers to hear, but as individuals, we need to make sure we know I'm not going to work myself into an early grave. The second one, which I think is the most powerful, I wish I had the courage to live a life authentic to myself and not just what others expected of me. I wish I stayed in touch with my friends. I wish I had the courage to express my feelings, and I wish I just let myself be happier. So I actually printed this off and put on the bulletin board above my computer, so that when I take a moment to pause during the day, I can kind of remind myself. 85-year-old Jeana, if I'm lucky to get that far, probably won't look back on this one meeting or this one work project and think, man, I wish I would have put in an extra 3 hours. Oops. Oh, sorry. I always encourage people, talk to a trusted friend, make sure you keep people around that you feel you can share your concerns with. I always journal my negative thoughts. So when there's something that I just have to get off my chest, I keep a journal that truly, if anybody ever found this journal, they'd probably think, wow, this person struggled. But it's not uncommon. A lot of people, famous people who pass away, they had their journals published and they found they really only journaled when they were negative or having bad thoughts. So sometimes just writing all of these things down, obviously not at work, I would never recommend that. But just getting these thoughts off your chest, especially the ones that you don't feel like you can share with people. Trying to stay active, eat healthy, get some good sleep, seek therapy. Hopefully therapy becomes more normalized. Apps like BetterHelp. We'll have a few more apps on here. Be able to connect with a therapist just over your phone, so you don't feel like you have to go to a counseling agency and make an appointment and sit in a lobby where you may recognize someone. You can do it a little bit more privately now. And then, like I've been emphasizing, always take responsibility for your mental and physical health. So at this point in the pandemic, we're hearing a lot of opinions of others. It's important to remember someone else's opinion is not my reality. And there are as many as opinions as there are people. So really keeping in mind is some people choose to wear masks, choose to take them off, choose to get vaccinated, choose not to. It's really important that every workplace has a culture that's supportive of the individual's choice. We don't all have to agree on everything, but we do have to be respectful of differing opinions. So another poll, after a stressful day, I often blank. Do you yell more, drink more, sleep more, or neglect your daily routine, or something else? I'll give everyone a few seconds to answer this.
We have about 60% who have voted, so we'll give everyone a few more seconds to submit.
Perfect, thank you.
All right, I'm gonna go ahead and close that poll now.
Okay, perfect. Hopefully everyone can see these poll results as well. Would that be correct, Heather?
Yes, everyone will. Mhm.
Okay, perfect. Just wanted to make sure that I, wasn't neglecting reading all of these. So neglecting daily routine. So on these next slides, we'll talk really quickly about some coping strategies. The most transformative strategy I've ever implemented in my life was mindfulness. There's many different ways to practice. We'll go through some on the next slide. But mindfulness really can transform you. If I were to answer this poll, maybe like 8 years ago, I definitely would have picked yelling. When I was stressed out, tired, I would just yell more and I would just feel much more irritable. Mindfulness really helped change all of that for me so that I feel like I'm not constantly reacting to things. I'm just able to thoughtfully respond to what's happening. There's 3 different types of therapy that I've used on different people before. Cognitive behavioral therapy is by and large the most common. It's really changing the way we think about things. You may get stuck in traffic. You truly cannot change the fact that you're stuck in traffic, but you can change how you think about it. So rather than saying, I'm going to be late, these idiots are not driving fast enough, what is going on? You say, now I have time to listen to some music. I downloaded a podcast earlier. I'm really glad that I have an opportunity. Knowing that no one's going to change the traffic for you, but you can take responsibility and change what you think. Dialectical behavioral therapy is also one we use in the hospital. It's really just becoming mentally resilient. This is one that every single child in the world should learn. Unfortunately, we don't learn it in our youth. We teach it to people who have struggled long enough that they need to become inpatient and receive therapy. But it really teaches us distress tolerance, how to handle things, observe things, and not feel like we have to be controlling, responsible, or change things. And then acceptance and commitment therapy, it's just identifying our values, which we use to drive a positive life. So thinking about the things that are most important to you, and then using that to make the decisions that kind of guide you through a life. So the mindfulness exercise, I'll just do a really quick one just so you guys can feel the benefit of it. If you just sit with your feet flat on the floor, I always put my hands just right on top of my legs. And you can either close your eyes or just cast your gaze gently downward. And sometimes it helps to put one hand on your stomach and just breathe in deeply until your stomach expands. Imagine that your torso is a jar and you want to fill the bottom of the jar with air first. And as you breathe in through your nose, just imagine that you're breathing relaxation. And then you can hold it for a beat or two, or you can just release it right away and try to exhale through your mouth as slowly as you possibly can. That's the real key to mindfulness, is just being able to exhale slowly. And then if you just roll your shoulders forward and then up towards your ears and then back down. For those of us sitting at computers, we tend to hunch forward throughout the day. And you can do that a few times, just rolling your shoulders up, back, and then just letting them fall naturally. And then just taking a few more deep, gentle breaths. And imagine that every time you exhale, you're breathing out stress and tension. And then just notice any areas of tension that you may feel in your body and just do your best to relax those muscles. And just know that you have nowhere to go, nothing to do right now. But breathe in deeply. And then when you feel ready, I'll just invite you to open your eyes and just slowly return your attention back to this room. So it's just an easy deep breathing exercise. There's also progressive muscle relaxation, which is excellent for people who struggle with getting to sleep. There's guided imagery where you can kind of picture yourself on a beach or in the mountains. And then there's also 4 square breathing, where you imagine that you breathe in for 4 counts, hold it for 4 counts, breathe out for 4 counts, and then hold it for 4 counts. You can change the numbers to kind of fit your lung capacity as well. Resources outside of work, like I said, online or in-person counseling, online support groups, practicing mindfulness or yoga can really do a lot to get stress out of our bodies. And then using apps like Calm, Insight Timer, Headspace, MoodFit, Mood Mission, or Happify. These are all excellent apps that can kind of give you daily reminders of really good mental health tips and resources. Ways that I found to create a positive life: drinking lots of water, reading books that I find can help me make sense of the world or add meaning. Man's Search for Meaning is by and large the absolute most life-changing book you could ever read. Being out in nature, now that it's spring, everything's green, just being able to walk around and enjoy it is a really nice change for those of us who are kind of stuck in homes with the furnace running and the air being too dry. Either practicing yoga or just doing daily stretches to try to release some of the tension from our bodies. Lavender is excellent as kind of a calm down smell. Using the Insight Timer. I personally, like I talked about having issues with sleep, use a sound machine at night to kind of create that dull hum in the background. And then the last picture, finding supportive people. It doesn't necessarily have to be 10 people, but finding people that you really feel have your back, people that you can lean on when things are stressful. And then bringing up to our last slide, obviously I included information on Prairie St. John's. We have 24/7 emergency care. We also do inpatient and outpatient for both substance use and mental health. So people who need help but aren't, at that crisis inpatient level can also do day treatment at Prairie St. John's, which can be really, really helpful. And then I left our contact information if you have any questions as well.
All right. Heather, do we have any questions in the chat that came up during Jeana's session?
We do have a few, and it looks like we've had some responses in the chat as well. Let me look here. We do have a great topic and overview. Thank you. Really quickly, while I am looking for these questions, I'm going to go ahead and launch our last poll. Just let us know how we did. It helps us know how to improve our webinars for the future. So go ahead and rate us 3, 2, or 1 stars. Really quick, looks like someone was asking about, was there a significant jump in the suicides in 2020 from 2019?
So I know there's been a lot of talk about that. I myself haven't seen hard data. A lot of times it takes quite a while to get the numbers from year to year. I do anticipate there will be quite a bit of research being conducted by major universities and organizations. I don't think we could ever say that there wasn't a jump. I think people struggled a lot more than really we ever have.
Hey, Jeana, this is Michelle. I actually Googled it because I could see the chat. So the CDC did release that number in April, and it actually went down. So it went down by 5.6% from 2019 to 2020. And that was the 3rd consecutive year, but the total number of deaths increased by 17.7% from 2019 to 2020. So I thought it was interesting.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and the difficult thing about suicides is that oftentimes they are made to look like accidents, and depending on the investigation, it can be quite difficult. We know sometimes they are ruled accidents when really it is a suicide. Not to leave you on a negative idea, but sometimes, if a car swerves into a tree and it was clear they didn't try to hit their brakes at all, things like that, it may be ruled as an accident. But if suicides are truly going down, then the work that we're doing is working. So that's good to hear, Michelle. Thank you.
Are there other questions?
That response. Yep, we have one more here. If anyone has any questions, go ahead and feel free. We do have a few more minutes that we can take some questions. The other one that's in here is, with the pandemic hopefully coming to a close, will we see a delayed effect on people? So in other words, a number of the people who kept their game face on, like some parents or, maybe some leadership, do you think that now the reality of what we all went through is going to start sinking in?
Definitely. During the pandemic, obviously our numbers really dropped. We know people weren't struggling any less during a pandemic, but people weren't leaving their homes. Maybe someone who would notice someone struggling didn't see that. So people were kind of suffering silently at their homes. For parents or leaders, they probably felt a huge burden to keep a smile on their face and keep going to work when maybe they were really suffering very deeply. So when a lot of counseling agencies closed or things were transitioning into Zoom, we do worry that people weren't accessing the help that they needed. At the hospital, people are coming in quite a bit more ill than they have been in years past. And we know it's because they were sicker longer. They weren't getting the help that they needed for a more significant amount of time. So obviously that's definitely a concern. I wouldn't be surprised if more people started accessing therapy now that they maybe feel we're in the home stretch of a pandemic. I know I need to be mindful about jinxing the pandemic, but hopefully people do feel that they can reach out for help. Joining even some sort of support group for people who get what you might be experiencing. Oftentimes we feel like we struggle so independently from others, but it's very common that other people are going through something similar. Being able to kind of reach out and share with that can be really powerful as well. Great question. Thank you all.
Thank you for that response. Michelle, did you have anything to add to that? All right, that's all the questions that we have.
Perfect. Thank you,
All
Heather.
right. Well, I wanted to take an opportunity to thank both Michelle and Jeana and Prairie St. John's for being such an awesome partner. And when we had a difficult topic, to reach out to those that could give us the most insight and offer the resources and support that our clients and our industry partners need. So I wanted to just remind everybody again about OECS being able to offer those continuing education credits. Please, if you have not done so already and you need them, enter your name into the chat with the request. We'll print the chat and our team will then follow up sending you a certificate via email. Then if you have questions through, afterwards, Jeana and Michelle share their information. You can also reach out to me and anyone on our OECS team, and we can connect you, find you some resources, get you in touch with Jeana, Michelle, and their team. And at this point, looks like one more message in the chat. So let me just see.
Yep, it's someone that just wants the CEUs. So yep, if there's anyone else out there who is making sure that they want to get credit, please let us know your first and last name in the chat and we'll have Melissa or the team reach out.
Yes. So thank you so much for attending and respecting your time. We did go about a minute over. So if there's no other questions, we also have, I wanted to just share, Jeana and Michelle will make these slides available. OECS Hours records our webinars, so that will also be available. And they have a handout that they provided that we'll send out to everybody that was logged in or registered. So please watch. You might see a couple emails, one notifying you, thanking you for attending, and then we'll try to send out that additional information. So with that, I hope you all have a wonderful day. Please remember that your employees' mental health is extremely important during all of this, even with transitioning back. For people coming back to work that might be a little bit afraid still, for those companies that don't really know what they're going to do with a requirement versus a mandate, with mask wearing or vaccines and things like that. Always consider your employees' feelings through all of this and help it develop your culture. So I hope you all have a great day. Thank you so much.